Welcome to Spokespeople Secrets to Build Your Brand, the inaugural SPOKEies Award event. We are celebrating the most talented in-house spokespeople across a variety of different industries, including health and pharma, finance, travel, nonprofit, and more. You're going to hear from more than 20 award-winning in-house spokespeople who have represented their brands with authenticity and established trust with their key audiences. They will share tips and best practices to help you turn your leaders and experts into influencers. We want you involved and want you to tweet your questions for the panelists using the event hashtag SPOKEies. That's hashtag SPOKEIES. We welcome those of you watching this event on compro.biz. We are also live streaming the event to the social media sites of many of our panelists. So let's get started. Meet Doug Simon, CEO of The Assignment Media, President-elect of PRSA New York, founder of the SPOKEies, and today's moderator.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caroline, and welcome everyone watching on the Compro portal that is powered by OnStream Media, and to those of you watching on the award winners' social channels through Social Media Live. We have more than 20 winners of the first ever SPOKEies Awards here with us today, and they'll share their tips to help turn your in-house experts, including those in the C-suite, into influencers. You're going to learn about their award-winning campaigns and how you can build trust and authenticity, as Carolina mentioned, for your organizations and your key publics. We've got 5 great panels of award-winning honorees, so let's get started. Welcome to Spokesperson Secrets to Build Your Brand. I'm Doug Simon, and joining me for this panel are first Sherry Sword, who's Vice President of Communications at Better Business Bureau at Dayton and Miami Valley. And Sherry is the SPOKEies Award winner in the Nonprofit Membership Association category. Sherry, do you have a top tip to share to get us started?
I think my top tip would be prepared. You have to be the expert, and so that means know what you're going to say, know what sound bite you want to get across. It means practice, practice, practice. Practice your body language, practice what you're going to say, make sure what comes out of your head is actually coming out of your mouth and not all jumbled. So really, be prepared.
Awesome. Well, it seems like you were prepared for that question. And now we'll turn to Danielle Holly. She's one of the 8 C-suite executives joining us today. She's CEO at Common Impact and SPOKEies Award winner in the C-Suite Leader Nonprofit Association category. Danielle, thanks so much for joining us. What's your top tip?
I would say, and I'm less prepared than you, Sherry, would say talk about the moment that you became a believer in whatever you're a spokesperson about, particularly if you were converted, right? If you were a skeptic and then became a believer, it helps your authenticity and gets people excited about what you're selling.
Awesome. That's great advice. And now there's no limit to the technology that we'll employ here. So joining us by telephone is Don Bush. He's Vice President of Marketing at Count and was awarded honorable mention in the Corporate Financial Services category. Hey, Don, what do you have for us? And thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Doug. You know, we've heard about practice, but I would say start small. You know, we have to communicate with other departments throughout our company all the time, and start with them. Internally, people will tell you more easily than external people where you've got problems, where you did something wrong, where you need to improve, and then work into something next, like moderate a webinar or something where you're still talking to lots of people, but it's in a very controlled environment, and then go to the big time where you're on stage, whether it's at a conference or an event or something like that. So kind of start small and work your way up so your material is practiced, your delivery is practiced, and you're ready for that stage.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's something we've experienced. A lot of clients, prospects will come to us, say, we want to be in the Wall Street Journal, we want to be on CNBC, and it's like, oh, well, where have they been? Well, nowhere. So it's very difficult to start at that level. Now, earlier, Carolina mentioned that we want the audiences participating in the discussion. So we'll start with our first polling question, where we ask you, the audience, to weigh in and get feedback from the experts. So here's the question, if we can put that up through the compro.com portal. Please rate your level of success generating exposure with an in-house spokesperson and choose one of the answers. Have you been extremely successful? Somewhat successful? Has it been a challenge? We've not yet worked with an in-house spokesperson, and for those of you watching on your screen, if you're not part of Compro, you can just tweet at us at the SPOKEies hashtag with question number 1 and the answer. If you are watching through Compro, you can just click the answer on the screen. We'll be leaving the poll open for about 15 seconds more, and we also look forward to receiving your questions through that portal or via Twitter, again, using the SPOKEies hashtag. So, Cherry, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the campaign itself?
The campaign that was SPOKEies involved our Marketplace Insights video. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to engage people more on social media and get to them to watch our videos. And so what we did is we went through and did short 1 minute, 1 minute and a half videos featuring local business leaders, the local influencers, sharing those business tips. So we went through and we did that. It was actually very successful. We had, over the course of the year, 25% of the videos that were watched on our social media were the Marketplace Insights videos. We were able to do it at very little cost, actually none except for staff time. So that was a plus for us. We were able to create some great exposure for our accredited businesses and our accredited charities. So that was a win. And the other thing is that it promoted ethics, which is the whole mission of the Better Business Bureau. And it featured those business leaders sharing best practices, helping others become the best that they can be.
Great. So you, in effect, created a platform and a forum for those that were doing good things to get their message out and really engage with the community.
Absolutely. Letting them shine and at the same time providing a great resource for our constituents.
Great. And Danielle, what was your take in terms of some of your ongoing efforts? And maybe you can share a little bit about the mission of your organization, because it's so powerful.
Sure. So our campaign is essentially our mission, which is to connect the professionals from companies to pro bono nonprofit consulting gigs, so building the capacity of nonprofits. And so what we're doing is we're essentially trying to create spokespeople out of everyone that engages in our programs, and particularly with corporate professionals, trying to connect them to the meaning that drives them. And so our campaign is, and every single one of our staff members has to be a spokesperson for us. Our campaign is to get those corporate professionals to think about themselves outside of their specific roles and sectors and think about what drives them and what they're passionate about, so they can bring that back to their desks at their offices, but also that they can contribute that in a meaningful way to nonprofits.
Great. And Don, let's bring you into the conversation, and feel free to jump on each other, especially interrupt me above all else. So Don, take us through some of what the goals and efforts of your campaign were and how you were able to achieve them.
Sure. In our field, we're a pretty technical type product, and we work in the financial industry, and so the products that we present have to appeal to a CFO, a CIO, and other managers throughout the line of business. And so it's very technical. And so we took the approach of thought leadership and education. And so our spokesfolks really need to educate without overtly selling. Everybody knows what company we're from, so they obviously know we've got something that we'd like to sell them. But that education role turns you into a consultative type company with experts at the top and less of a selling, pushy organization. And so that was our goal, is to come across that thought leadership. You can trust us, you can ask us questions, and we'll get you what you need.
Great. And we've already got the results back from the survey. About 60% of the group felt they've had success getting exposure for their in-house people, while 40% of them are struggling with it as a challenge. You've shared some tips. I'll throw this open generally to the panel and let one of you dive in. What are some of the tactics to overcome the struggles in terms of planning, preparation, getting your in-house spokesperson ready? Do you see, Danielle, do you want to take a jump at that as we get started? What are some of the things to think about?
Well, and I think this is answering your question, but one of the things that I've thought about as I resource and identify spokespeople is that there are folks that have skills on paper that make them good spokespeople, and then there are folks that just have the energy and excitement about what they're talking about. And so figuring that out as you go along and really identifying and directing those energies appropriately is one of the things that I've learned in terms of creating strong spokespeople.
Cool.
Hey, Doug, this is Don. I'll jump in on that
Perfect.
one. I couldn't agree more. You've got to find the right face, because really this is a face to your company at whatever event or campaign you're running. And sometimes it's not the CEO. Sometimes it's a really good product manager that can speak well, that can take questions on the fly, that doesn't get flustered easily. They have a really good background on the industry and the technical nature of the product. So really looking for that person that can bring the energy and bring the face of your organization to the public is really what we would look for.
You know, for us, part of it is we want to be that go-to resource for the media. So it's being sure that we're available when they need us. If we're out and about, then we'll meet them in a restaurant parking lot to do those interviews. We did that 2 weeks ago. Or, you know, we'll go to the station and instead of them coming to us, we're flexible. If we don't have the answers or no, we're not the source for that interview, we refer them to the right source. So they really look to us as a go-to to do those interviews. In fact, I've had a couple of reporters joke around saying that we've had more airtime than their own reporters. So, I mean, really for us...
Were they happy about that?
No, not so much. Not so much. But, you know, we really do try to be that go-to resource for them and make life easy for them.
Great. And Sherry, we
Doug,
Oh, go ahead, Don, and then we've got a question online for Sherry. So, Don, go for it.
All right. I just wanted to quickly add, I think that's a really good point, is throughout your organization, you can have different spokespeople on different topics. Is this disaster recovery? Is this technical? Is this consumer? Is this, you know, what is the topic? And let's put that right spokesperson there. And sometimes your customers can be the best spokesperson for you. And having some of those references available are also really powerful.
Yeah, and that works both B2C and B2B marketplace as well. So, Sherry, this was a question that came up for you. It was asked by Dick Napinski, and he asked about measuring success of your campaign. How do you do it? Is it additional membership, viewing stats, recognition of ethics and their use, or another method? And I think we can then let the rest of the panel jump in on measuring success. So, Sherry?
I think it depends on what you're working on. For instance, with the Marketplace Insights, we had some measurable objectives when we set up the plan. So in that case, is we wanted to see an increase in engagement and see the numbers of viewership go up. It is setting that how many constituents you want to be involved in it. So we wanted 80% of our accredited businesses, accredited charities to be featured, ended up being 100% of them. We wanted to do it at no cost. So that was another measurement for us, and we were able to do that. We didn't have any expenses. So I think it really just depends on what the program is and what you're trying to accomplish. But it has to be measurable for you to be able to know that you succeeded.
Yeah, and to your point, it sounds like, you know, what Don was saying, where you have to be particular about which spokesperson is representing each issue. You have to have specific goals for each effort and campaign and make sure that's all in a line. Danielle, it looked like you were ready to jump in on there.
Sure. So, there are the measurement of marketing activities, right? And with social media channels and digital channels, that becomes easier to see how people are engaging and how much. For us, as Don shared earlier, our work is about education and thought leadership. And so inbound requests for information, additional education, partnership is how we really use our key success metric.
Cool. And they're telling me that we have another question. Let's see if I'm looking at that. I see that same question. It just seems to be the same one, so I'm not going to ask you the same question again. Given the nature of this, that we're celebrating the honorees for the first ever SPOKEies Awards, maybe I can get your take on both, you know, the feeling of recognition and also the importance of recognize those who are working inside organizations, creating trust and authenticity with their key publics.
It was a great honor to be recognized as a SPOKEies. It was a surprise to me. My coworkers nominated me, so that made it even more special. So it was a great honor, and I think that it only inspires us to continue to do better and to help wherever we can help others.
Awesome. And Danielle, and then Don, we'll go to you.
I'd say exactly the same thing. It's an honor, and it provides a platform to talk about our work, which I really appreciate.
Cool. And Don, I know there's a lot of competition in your category.
Sure, and it's you never put together campaigns or activities because you're looking for awards, but it is always nice to be recognized for the quality of your work, the impact that you have, and so we were pretty pleased to see that happen, and the entire team here was pretty surprised, of course, but honored just the same, and it's always great to be recognized by peers and folks in the industry.
Awesome, and as you know, the viewers can tell, this is just the start of it, but we really have some top-notch talent and successful, not only communicators, but people who are actually living and breathing the work and making it happen, which makes such a difference. We're going to be moving on to our next panel shortly. I know it's been quick, but I'll give you time for just a final wrap-up thought, advice you've got for people to take away to those watching. What can they do, put into place starting now to make their organizations better?
You know, I think it is just prepare. Don't go anything willy-nilly. You need to go through and you need to do your research when you're being a spokesperson. So you are talking at the experts, is practicing. If you're putting together a campaign, go through and do focus groups, do whatever it is in that regard. You want to set those measurable objectives when you're doing a story, that you're getting the points across that you want to get across and then impacting your organization the way you want it to impact your organization. And then evaluate to see how you did so that the next time you learn from it and can only continue to do better.
Great. And Danielle?
When you're thinking about yourself as a spokesperson or you're trying to cultivate that in others, think about what connects you to what you're talking about and the topic, issue, product that you want to engage others in, because there won't always be time to prepare, right? And you want to be able to go off script. And so understanding really what's meaningful about it to you and your story is something that can ground you in those situations.
Yeah, and that really ties in well to the mission of your organization, because it's about people leveraging their own skill sets that they've developed professionally for the benefit of organizations they care about.
Precisely.
Which is really just a cool link, and that applies across the board for this. And Don, we're going to let you wrap it up now with your final takeaway suggestion.
You bet. I think you can't force fit people into this role. Title doesn't really mean experience in doing this, and so find those people that do put on that good face, that can work on their feet, do have good experience, because they really are, for good or for bad, they're going to represent your company. And it doesn't matter if they're a manager or a C-level. If they do it well, that's who you want to be the face, and that's who you want to get out front.
Well, it's clear that you guys are all deserving award winners. I also want to give a special thanks, because through Social Media Live, a number of you are reaching out to the members of your organization through your Facebook platform, Sherry, at Dayton BBB. Danielle, through your Facebook at Common Impact 1. We don't know what happened to at Common Impact. We can investigate that
I don't
after.
either, actually.
Also, your Twitter is at Common Impact. So that was really cool. We hope those people will stay on and stay tuned in, because there's a lot of great stuff to come. And now I'm going to throw it back to Carolina as we get prepared for our next segment. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in so far. A lot more great stuff to come right at you.
Thanks, Doug. While we get the next panel ready, I wanted to share that we spoke with Michael A. Smith, the winner of the Corporate Health and Pharma category, for his work at Life Extension. He offered key insights about his successful marketing campaign. You'll see him share what he thinks a successful spokesperson should know.
So I got to tell you, it's so amazing and such an honor to be a spokesperson for the brand, and this is one of the biggest tips, for the brand that you believe in. Or the organization that you have passion for. And I know a lot of people know that. It's kind of like walking the talk. But it's so true, because when you have passion and you really believe in the message, in the products, maybe even take those products like I do with supplements, that passion comes out. And at the end of the day, that's what people remember. They remember how you made them feel, and they get energized off your energy. So that's tip number one. You gotta love what you're doing. You gotta love the brand or organization you're working for. And then I think second for me, and this is important because I speak to lots of different media. I speak to trade media, consumer-facing media, TV, radio, whatever it is, you have to know your audience, and that's so important. And you have to tailor your message and your story for that specific group. And when you do that and that passion comes out, you're gonna be a successful spokesperson. And it's one of the best jobs around.
Great advice. Before we get started with our next group, remember, we want you involved. You can submit questions you want our moderator to ask the panelists via Twitter using the hashtag SPOKEies. Back to Doug.
Great, thanks, Caroline. And I also want to thank the great production team we have here coming to you live from our D.S. Simon Media Studio in New York. It's hot outside, but it's cool in here, especially with the level of talent that we've got assembled to give you some great advice that you can put into play right now, if I'm able to get that out, for your organization. And I'm Doug Simon. Welcome to Spokesperson Secrets to Build Your Brand. Now, this panel is going to give us a deep dive into how you get the best results working together as a team. We'll also look at their award-winning results for the Atlanta Cast program that they created. Joining me for this panel is the SPOKEies Award winner in the nonprofit health category, Luke Margolis. Luke is Corporate Communications Manager at Atlantic Health Systems, overseeing 16,000 team members. He's joined by two of his colleagues. Valerie Simon, seated far away from me, as you can tell. She's the Chief Marketing Officer, who I've known for a number of years. A disclaimer, I'm not related, but I am a huge fan. And in the center is Jim Ferguson, who's the Director of Communications. And thanks so much, guys, for joining us. Let's start as we've been doing with Luke. Do you want to jump in and maybe give what's your top tip and lesson that you want to share?
Sure, and I'm sure I'm not going to be breaking too much ground here in everybody's minds, but I think, and it's something you've touched on already, the value of authenticity. It's something that I'm sure everybody's going to hear a lot about today, but it really can't be overstated. I think at the end of the day, communicators, spokespeople, however you want to refer to us, we are, our mandate is to convey information. And doing that in a compelling way is obviously important, or nobody's going to pay attention. But once you've got them, if you're not building that trust between yourself and your audience, your message ends up getting lost or not fully conveyed. And so I think ultimately it's about remaining authentic to your message and who you are and to the people you're trying to reach.
Cool. Jim?
I echo that 100% and add understanding the brand and the brand promise and being able to bring that to life for folks through your communications, through how you're tying them into the organization is very important.
Great. Valerie?
That's all, I think, terrific. The one thing I'd say to build on that is to understand you're not just crafting a statement, but you're actually building a story. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean, rather than writing words and focusing on that, one of the things Luke does is he really produces a developing story over time. So I would think.
And I would think it's also critical to assemble talent as a team. We'll get to that in a moment, but there was another question, another two that came through the social channels, and folks are hijacking it. We love it. Keep it coming. Let's go for it. So here's a question. What's the best way for an unseasoned company spokesperson to prepare other than working with a media trainer? And that was a question from Julie Livingston. Thanks so much for that. And Julie, one thing that I can say on top of that, and this is a social question, we'll get to the polling question a little bit later in there, is that you have to make sure the story aligns with your skill set. If you're throwing someone in with something they're not familiar with, they're not comfortable with, it may not be their top priority or strong belief, you're going to be set up to fail. So the key is setting up people for success, especially as a first-time spokesperson. We're going to get some great tips from the panel. Folks, jump in. What are your thoughts?
If unseasoned means young and boyish looking, then absolutely, that's totally me. But I think that a credit to your point, and I think it's served us very well with Atlanta Cast. I mean, my background is not exclusively in public relations or in media relations. It also is on the journalistic side as a former TV broadcaster. So the fit with Atlanta Cast and what the skill sets were that I brought to the table was really hand in glove. And it's a credit, I think, to Valerie and to Jim to empower me to do what came naturally to me from a training standpoint, career-wise, and just sort of who I am and what my natural abilities are. And I think you're right. I think it's finding a way to maximize your abilities packaged with a really compelling story about, who could find better material for a former journalist to work with than a hospital system?
Yeah. Tremendous stuff. Valerie?
Yeah, I think that setting people up to succeed is key, and that means not only giving them opportunities, but giving them access to the right resources. So, in order to understand, speaking to the true subject matter experts, making sure that they have, access all the way up through our CEO, who Luke frequently engages with.
Great. Now, at Atlantic Health Systems, you guys seem very well aligned, so it makes it feel it was easy, though I'm guessing there were moments, maybe it wasn't as easy as it might seem, but a lot of organizations, for the communicators getting on the same page with marketing and different groups and C-suites. How do you navigate that? Because I'm sure that's a challenge many in our audience have to deal with on a regular basis.
One of the things that's interesting about our group is Luke does bring that broadcast experience. Valerie as a seasoned marketing veteran, and also having the vision of what this broadcast could be as a communication tool for both our 16,000 plus team members as well as the communities we serve. And then I sort of serve in that directorial capacity where I bring clinical leadership to the table. I'm constantly looking throughout the system for the good news, for the stories, and between the three of us, we're able to come together and produce this.
Yeah, what do you do, say, if the CEO is just not comfortable with what you're directing or wants to push you in an unhelpful direction?
I think we're kind of fortunate there.
Right.
Yeah, we really are. So our CEO, Brian Granulotti, is incredibly supportive. I think one of the reasons that he brought me to Atlantic Health System was he realized we needed to do an even better job telling our stories. So I have a kind of unique challenge where we have incredible stories happening every day, first in the world's clinical trials, things that you really wouldn't expect to be happening. So our challenge, it's a burden to make sure we're getting out these stories every day and that people are aware of what's going on. You asked about how do we align, whether it's digital marketing or PR or traditional marketing, and I think one of the things we've tried to do is focus on the patient, whether it's the customer or the patient, but if we can align how we communicate, and it starts out with our strategic plan, right? So we all know our mission, we all know our strategic plan, and then we figure out what role we play in that.
Excellent. So that's a great way to do it. We do have another question from the social media folks here, and we really appreciate your efforts in this. And so let me get right to it. And this is the unseen. So what are your tips for establishing your organization and spokesperson as a go-to resource?
As a go-to resource for the media, I think it's a little bit of a different thing for different folks. I mean, one of our strong suits is that we are all, and there are other folks who handle PR responsibilities in our organization as well, but ultimately we are all a very tight-knit group. We meet frequently, we discuss the issues surrounding our organization frequently, the issues surrounding the communities we serve frequently. So remaining as a cohesive unit makes us super valuable, whether it's to our partners in the community or to members in the press, because they know that they can reach out to us, to any of us, frankly, and that they can get the quality information they need to do the stories or to the reports that they need to do. So I think remaining all on the same page, as cohesive as possible, is a huge asset for us.
And we've really been able to maximize the use of our intranet, and folks know now that they can bring. We have 16,000 plus investigative reporters, if you will, and the best spokespeople in the world are our team members that go out into the community and share the story of Atlantic Health System. So they know that if they come to us, that we can help them craft that, and we can give them the information they need to be able to go into the community and tell our story.
So it sounds like a key element is you've set up a process with the voices of the people who work within the organization have a channel to be easily heard. Are they frequently engaged in the Atlantic Cast content?
Yeah, I mean, and this is, again, it's very much a credit to Valerie, because I think for the uninitiated, we run the Atlantic Cast format very much like any traditional news station would run their morning story meetings. We don't do it every day from a morning story meeting capacity, but certainly bi-weekly. And it's that level of pitching stories, getting things sent in from around the organization, having an email inbox where people know they can send stuff directly to us on a first-person basis. We will respond to them. We'll get more information. We'll follow up, ask for photos, ask for video. So it is very much a newsroom-style process integrated into how we do what we do from a communication standpoint. And again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's very much a credit to the format that's been built by Valerie and Jim to enable that type of communication.
Awesome. Well, great information so far. We're going to give you a chance to wrap up with your final thought before we move to the next panel. Once you're completed, we'll be taking another question from you, the audience, a polling question on that. And so now give us some time for a final thought that you have on that takeaway that you want to leave the audience with, lesson learned.
I guess we'll go on down the line. First, thanks for having us today, but
Of course,
also,
thank you.
too, ultimately, it's sort of how we began the conversation. I think remaining authentic and true to yourself is just absolutely key. And I think at the end of the day, and it's something I may have even sent in, we sent in for you guys.
In the award,
website.
yeah.
Ultimately, it's not about you as a spokesperson. It's about the people you're trying to serve.
Great. And we're also looking at some feedback on the importance of recognition, the SPOKEies Award, the fact that you won.
A huge honor for me. So thrilled to be here today, and thankful for the recognition. I think to be among such talented and accomplished people is something I'm sure I'll treasure for a long time.
Great. Well, you guys have been great. I'm hopeful my team can put the polling question in the prompter, so I'll be able to relate it to you if they want. I can go with that. But thanks to this great group, we're standing by to go back to Carolina. And if we can put the second polling question up so the audience gets a chance to vote for it. And there it is. Thank you. So what are the keys to an award-winning campaign? And you can select all the answers that apply to you. A is the development and implementation of a focused messaging strategy, campaign reach, a high level of achievement of your organization's KPIs, that's C. And for those of you watching on Compro, make your selection on screen. If you're watching on social media, tweet your answers with the SPOKEies hashtag, followed by the question number and your choice. You can pick more than one, as I said. We'll leave the poll open for about 15 more seconds, so move your mice really quickly. Of course, if you're online, you can continue to provide us with those updates, and we'll continue to welcome your questions through the Compro portal or via Twitter using the SPOKEies hashtag. Thanks again to this group, and now let's go back to Carolina.
That was a great panel. Now, we caught up with Mark Hill, CEO of Association for Creative Industries, who was an honorable mention in the Nonprofit Trade Association category. He shares his advice helping spokespeople relate to their key audiences, advice that he learned while he was rebranding his nonprofit. So let's hear what he has to say.
Hi there, Mark Hill. I'm President and CEO of AFCI, or Association for Creative Industries. The best advice that I can give in this process is the single most important thing is to listen. Understand who your various audiences are, understand what each individual needs and wants and pain points are, and then be as transparent and as authentic as you possibly can in delivering on their needs and wants and pain points. And then the second thing I would do is adjust your communication to suit the various vehicles, whether it's a face-to-face, whether it's across Skype, whether it's a one-on-one, whether it's on an industry panel. And last but not least, understand that you need to constantly do it. One and done does not work today. Things changing so fast. And so we are constantly surveying, whether it's member satisfaction surveys or focus groups, to continue to understand what our members need and adjust our message accordingly.
Good tips, Mark. Remember, you can submit your questions and participate with us live using hashtag SPOKEies on Twitter. Take it away, Doug.
Welcome to Spokesperson Secrets to Build Your Brand. I'm Doug Simon. I guess you probably already know that. And now we have the first ever two-time winner seated next to me, so lots of pressure. It's Donna Lavoie, probably not that helpful. She's president and CEO of Lavoie Health Science. She's SPOKEies Award winner in the Corporate Emerging Growth Startups category and in the C-Suite Leader Corporate categories. And she's also live streaming the event via Twitter, at Lavoie Group, and on LinkedIn. So Donna, we're going to start. What's your top tip?
My top tip is, for us, Doug, our audiences or our clients are experts in science and medical innovation. So for them, what's really important is how do we take their innovations and make them very simple? How do you take complex data, complex information, and simplify it? That's very, very important for our audience.
Great. And next up, we've got Sue Rabati. She's president and lead spokesperson for MedShadow Foundation, also dealing with medical information. She was a SPOKEies Award finalist in the nonprofit health category. And Sue, what's your top tip?
Well, I took a different direction on that, and that is when I started MedShadow Foundation 5 years ago, I had no medical background, but we educate the general population on the side effects of medicines. So I needed to make myself into an expert. So I did a lot of donated articles to places like Reader's Digest has run some of our stuff, and Healthy Women has, and there's half a dozen or so other sites that run it, which help give me a wider platform. And then also to make myself into more of an expert, I shamelessly nominated myself for a position on the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA has advisory committees that have opinion that are presented drugs and make opinions. So I applied for the Drug Safety and Research Management Advisory Committee and got on it as a consumer representative. So it's fantastic. I work with wonderful doctors and pharmacists and have become much more knowledgeable, and it gives me a status from which to speak.
Yeah, and that's such an important point to establish credentials, which brings us to our next guest who's joining us via Skype, and it's Roy Taylor. Now, he was Corporate Vice President and Worldwide Head of AMD Studios at the time when he was the SPOKEies Award winner, and right in the corporate technology category. And currently, he's the founder and Chief Revenue Officer of Mr. Studio, and we'll find out a little bit about that. Nice to see you. And Roy, what's your top tip?
My top tip is to make sure that you are aware of exactly who you're speaking to. The tip seems kind of obvious, but I think what it needs to do is for people to really, really drill into that. So, for example, if I'm presenting into a hall in a particular place and time, I will try and ask the organizers to literally give me a list of the names and job titles and companies if possible. You can't speak directly to hundreds of people in different jobs and roles and companies, but you can get a sense of what might be important to them. And so every point you need to make needs to, in my opinion, finish with, and this is important to you because. Once you establish a conversation, a rapport with people who are interested in what you have to say because you're speaking directly to them, then your presentation becomes a conversation and not a pitch.
Great. And we'll stick with you, Roy, and just to find out, MR Studio or Mr. Studio, hope I didn't butcher that. Tell us a little bit about what that does and what your role is there.
Well, that's a holding name. So if anybody's watching and thinks it's a terrible name, I agree with you. It turns out that when you start a new company, just about every four-letter acronym or bunch of consonants and vowels is gone. So we do now have a final name, and we'll be announcing that soon. But the company is designed to make pixels intelligent, which is a huge, huge opportunity. So presenting that is going to be challenging because it's a bit like inventing and announcing the wheel.
Cool. And if you can help make the MC of this event sound intelligent, you'll really have accomplished something. Now, Donna, you're at an interesting spot here because you're also working to represent your own organization and get your name and brand out there. But you also have to work with different organizations who come to you for your expertise to help guide them. We talked briefly in the last segment with the Atlantic Health Systems folks about navigating the communication inside, and they seem to have a very unique setup there where people are getting along focused on the mission. But how do you try and help your clients get that kind of focus so they can work together and not in opposition, which I know can be such a challenge?
Yeah, it is a very interesting area, and you know, as you mentioned, it is very complex because it's also a regulated industry, and so many of our clients also have the added regulatory aspect of also being public companies. And so, you know, you've got a lot of things tugging at you. You want to make things simple, but you also have, in some cases, an obligation to communicate certain things. So, you know, there is a lot of navigation, and there's, you know, a good brainstorming sessions around these kinds of complex challenges and figuring out what's the best way to communicate in the proper way, right? Because there are regulatory constraints, and we have to make sure that we're making it simple, but not so simple that it's wrong.
Right, that is important. And Sue, you know, you've taken on a challenge, and you know, I think you relate back to what Danielle had said earlier about the importance of having it be a personal mission if you're going to be an effective spokesperson. You know, clearly you're engaged directly.
Yes, I'm very passionate about the subject, and you can read more about it on my website if you want to go at www. But passion is probably the most important thing you can have, and it can be, you know, a little bit overwhelming for my family because I bring it home, I take it with me to social situations, I involve my friends, and I make great demands. It's difficult to be my friend because I'm, you know, often talking about the side effects of medicines and the alternatives to medicines that will make you happier and healthy. And, maybe my poor husband, maybe you should go exercise today. So, yeah, being passionate is very important. But I actually really love the point that
Roy had made.
Yes, about ending every sentence with, and this matters to you because. I think that is a wonderful trick. I had forgotten it. I used to be a salesperson. We used to use it. And I'm going to remember that, and that matters to me because it makes it personal to other people.
Yeah, and in the spirit of promotion, I should give you kudos because you've got people watching this on the Facebook channel of your organization, which is at medshadow.foundation. Also on your Twitter feed at med_shadow. And I believe on your LinkedIn channel as well through the social media live service that we're offering here at DS Simon Media. Roy, I thought you might be interested in this. We have some of our poll results, and I was surprised of the answers that there was a majority were more focused, they rated higher, and they could choose all of them. The development and implementation of a focused messaging strategy was most important. Campaign reach was second, and moving the needle, KPIs, was third below that, which it almost seems like clearly they're all important. But what's your take on prioritizing when you're trying to get your message out, especially as a spokesperson?
I think your audience are incredibly smart because I agree with the order of priority. You can reach a wide audience if you pay the right money and you have the right PR firm or whatever. You can reach a wide number of people. But if you don't have a succinct message, if you're not clear and crisp in the message that you have, then you've really, you're not going to get the best return on investment for reaching a wider audience. So I think that the viewers are correct. You've got to nail that first.
Cool. That's good. Any other thoughts about that in terms of priorities? Roy obviously made a pretty powerful statement there.
Yeah, I would just add that, going back to knowing your audience. And, not in every case you're looking to reach a wide audience, right? In some cases, it's the right message to the right audience. It may be more tailored. It may be, not necessarily a consumer message. And for us, in the work that we do, many of our clients are, maybe looking to give a message to investors or to strategic partners. And that's a highly specialized kind of message. It's not necessarily a consumer one. But yet they may have the need as they move forward into more of a commercialization model to get a broader audience to message to a broader audience. So you really need to sort of think about what is the goal and what are they trying to achieve.
Well, I'd like to just jump in there if I
Sure.
may.
Sure.
The other thing I would add to that is that words matter and phrases matter. There was a movement in the UK, where, of course, I'm from, against genetically modified foods, and the organisation was struggling until it came up with a phrase, Frankenstein foods, and then immediately it started to get traction. In my own my new business, we spent weeks circling around until we settled on intelligent pixels. So I would also advise, don't just throw words out, but take some time with your teams to think about how words and phrases sound, say them out loud, practice them, so that they resonate with the audience as well.
That's awesome. And to show just how smart Roy is, even from far away via Skype, he was able to figure out that the Frankenstein food was being served in our green room for the folks here in attendance. So he had awesome insight on that. We have a couple of questions and comments from people who've been watching, so I'll try and get those to you. And maybe Sue, if you want to jump in. There are some, what are best practices for subject matter experts working with spokespersons from an educational standpoint? Is it ongoing sessions, one time, quarterly? Please advise, and it's Roderick from Vegas, and he's putting a shout out to their hockey team, Go Knights, and he's also asking if we will be archiving a link to the webcast, which we will. So, the Rangers have been done long ago, so I'm down for Go Knights. And Sue, if you want to jump in, best practices for social subject matter experts working with spokespersons. And then after this, we can get to your final thoughts for this segment and move on to the next panel.
At MedShadow, we have a medical advisory panel that we call on. And so as regular readers or visitors to the website, we'll see some names recurring because they're experts and we've vetted them to be free of pharmaceutical influence, that they're not taking large honoraria, and so that their opinions are independent. Not that people who receive honoraria can't have independent. It just seems a little more secure that way. So we do use that, but we also go outside. We make sure that we use professional health journalists who have wide contact lists so that we can get a variety of opinions. And just talking about tailoring to the audience, we have more than 40% of our regular site visitors are male, which is a little surprising on a health website. So we always make sure that we have a mixture of articles targeted towards the male audience. When we look at what articles we've run, what articles are coming up, we make sure that we've got one for the sandwich generation, the women who are taking care of their parents and their children, and one for men 25 to 35, which is this odd segment that seems to love us, and then another one for seniors. We've got a big group of 65 pluses. So segmenting is important.
And you made a great point there about trust. And one of the things that I've noticed is that trust, you have to work this long to get it and keep it going, but you can mess it up in just like that tiny amount of time, and one misstep really can get you in trouble. That was sort of the thinking behind the development of the SPOKEies Awards, because we felt it was sort of an overlooked area to actually recognize people who are dealing with truth and authenticity to help promote their organization and get their message out there. What is being our first two-time winner meant to you? No one's taken that away from you, so that's really cool. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that, sort of why you decided to get involved and engaged with it?
Yeah. So, you know, the exciting part about developing our campaign for the bio organization was all about, you know, how do these companies tell their stories in 15 slides, which is, you know, pretty difficult for these science types to do. So it goes back to the earlier message about keeping things simple without jeopardizing the integrity of the data or the story, and really getting these folks to take their very complex science and technical stories and break it down and actually storytell, right? That's the challenge. That's the challenge for these folks. And also just, you know, getting back and building on what Sue said with regard to getting spokespeople ready. We recently trained a pediatric oncologist around some key data around brain tumor that was presented at a major medical meeting. And one of the things that we were working through with him is, you know, what are the 3 top key questions that you don't want to be asked, right? where are the holes?
Oh, great. Well, we're saving those for the next panel. That will go. Sue, do you want to take a stab at that? Just the whole idea of recognizing people who are speaking on behalf of their own organizations and the importance of it.
It is. I'd never heard of it before. A good friend of mine who told me about it and then ultimately nominated me and our organization for this. And it's kind of cool. I never really thought of myself as a spokesperson. I'm a blogger and I'm an advocate and I'm a panelist, but I hadn't thought of it as a spokesperson, but yet that's really my most important role.
Right.
And the important part is to make everybody on our team, I make it sound like I'm alone here. We have, you know, a lot of people who work with us. Everybody needs to be an advocate. Everybody has to be a spokesperson. So thank you for making it important.
Awesome, great. And now we'll turn to our intelligent pixel who is visiting with us via Skype as we wrap up this segment. Roy, your take on the SPOKEies, and we'll be doing the poll in the next panel, so not right yet on that. We'll wait a little bit on that. But Roy, why don't you share your take on the recognition being part of the SPOKEies?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say a thank you to Chris Hook and Stella Lee from AMD, my former employees who nominated me. That's very kind of them. I also applaud you for doing this, not for my own sake, just to be recognized, but actually I think that professionalism and recognition of best practice in spokespersons is actually a really wonderful thing to do. You know, there are companies that sometimes have great products and services that don't always get the success they deserve because they sometimes find it difficult to articulate the value. really good quality spokespersons can help them with that. And so I think that this is more than just wonderful recognition of some very talented people. It's actually a really terrific direction to take the articulation of value.
Thanks, we appreciate that. And obviously, you know, the folks we've been able to speak to here are pretty amazing at this and really conveying message, but it really comes into belief in what they're talking about and caring. There's so much passion. It's really wonderful to see and express. So I'm going to send it back to Carolina. Thanks so much for this panel, and we'll get ready for the next session.
Very insightful discussion. You'll now see Susan Miller, Director of the Better Business Bureau in Southern Arizona, share the top tips spokespeople should know to structure their media campaigns to get the most exposure.
I would say definitely strategize your messaging points ahead of time. Be succinct, be relatable, be approachable, and stick to the facts. That's really important. And make sure that, you know, if you're a one-person band, that you've managed your time accordingly so that you can be responsive if you only have 15 minutes or 30 minutes. You know, we really definitely have to juggle our time, but stick to the facts no matter what.
Now, you'll hear from Sam Fay, the winner of the Most Authentic Corporate category, as well as the Senior Vice President of Global Brand and Strategy at Guinness World Records.
I think people in the company that are passionate about their brand should get out and tell people about it. I think they need to tell stories in an authentic and engaging way and engage with the media at the same time. If you can talk about your brand authentically, you know, setting an example to other people in the company and getting them excited about sharing the stories, it's a fantastic way not only to network and to learn about other industries, but to really represent and show what your brand is capable of.
Thanks for the tips. Keep on sharing your thoughts and submitting your questions via Twitter. Let's get back to our next panel of SPOKEies honorees.
Thanks, Carolina. Great job, and also always fun to hear what Sam Fay has to say. We probably should have thought about it and tried to make this panel a Guinness World Record holding title, but we didn't have that together. Maybe that's for year 2 of the SPOKEies that we'll pull that together. We have 2 great SPOKEies Award winners on our next panel, but before we get to them, we're going to get some more feedback from our audience with our last polling question. And this one relates to influencers. So the question is, how are you working with influencers? And you can choose one. One is we hire outside influencers to represent our brand. Another is connecting my in-house experts to influencers. The third choice is both A and B, or we're not working with influencers. For those of you watching on Compro now, make your selection on the screen. If you're watching on social media, tweet your answer with the SPOKEies hashtag, followed by the question number and your choice. And you can't quite pick more than one on this one, so we'll leave the poll open for about 15 more seconds. We also welcome your questions through the Compro portal or via Twitter. So far, we'll be rooting for any team that anyone who submits a question is a fan of. So let's get back to the action, and welcome to Spokesperson Secrets to Build Your Brand. I'm Doug Simon. Let's meet our next panel featuring 2 SPOKEies Award winners in the nonprofit categories. Seated next to me, Meredith Mascara is CEO of the Girl Scouts of Greater New York. She's the SPOKEies Award winner in the nonprofit youth category. And what's your top tip?
My top tip would be to be authentic. I think that Luke had mentioned that in a previous one, but it's so important. And I think in all of the media platforms today, it's very easy to detect when someone is not authentic or true to themselves or true to their mission and true to the brand. So for me, it's really making sure that that everything that we're delivering and everything that we're talking about and doing just really comes with the authenticity that serves our mission.
Great. And before we get to Patrick, do you want to give a shout out to the Girl Scouts who may be watching on the Girl Scouts Facebook at Girl Scouts NYC? I would think you would.
Absolutely, because we serve 30,000 girls in New York City, and the best part of my job and being able to speak about them is that they have the best stories to talk about, and they are actually our best spokespeople in the world to talk about what we do. But yes, a big shout out to all my Girl Scouts who are watching and all the leaders and volunteers who support them.
Yeah, and I don't want to throw shade on any of my other panelists because they've all been awesome, but I say, you know, now that I've been hosting an event on the Girl Scouts Facebook Live page in New York City, there's really no other place for me to go
It's the place
in
to
my
be.
career. So that's been really awesome.
You've made it.
Great.
You'll get the cookies tomorrow.
We have some cookies. I've got some s'mores at home. We're ready to go. Okay, we'll get focused. I'm sorry, I'm losing control of this. So we've got Patrick Cards also, and he's done some really awesome work as communications officer at the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship Foundation. That's why he's a SPOKEies Award winner in the nonprofit education category. Why don't you share your top tip as well?
I think my tip is the same advice that my wife gives me regularly on what makes a successful marriage, and that's you have to be positive and flexible. I think it is the organizations that are unicorns out there that determine whether one is successful or not based on whether they followed a communication strategy with fidelity, they're not there. I mean, each one of us, as we look at this, we go to great lengths and we create strategies and plans and everything else. But if we're not willing to adapt, if we're not able to be flexible, if we're not able to change the messaging based on what's happening in real life, add or subtract audiences, change tactics, you're never going to reach the goals that you're trying to achieve.
And that's a great point. So Meredith, maybe you can jump in. What are some ways maybe where you've had to be flexible? Because a lot of times it's trial and unfortunately error, because they don't just say trial, it's trial and error. So the key is to be able to learn quickly and make adjustments during that process. What are some of the ways you try and do that?
Well, one of the things, I mean, just recently, I would say in this past year, a lot of things have changed in the environment for our girls and for our volunteers and for women in general. So we've had to be very reactionary to that. Also being very conscientious that we're an all-inclusive organization and we represent every girl in the city. So finding that balance of how to really respect the organization and our membership and everything that they have, but being flexible enough to react to everything that's going on in society right now, and giving, we serve girls, and girls are really out there on social media. They are the ones there. We don't pay influencers. We have girls who are on their phones who are natural influencers doing that for us. So we have to give them the proper tools also, and to give them the training in how to be their own spokespeople on social media and all of the platforms. And that's a very responsive, and like I said, that flexibility is really key. But we've been in a lot of flexible moments right now where we have to react, but also having a very solid strategy of our mission and our brand that we have to drive forward at all times.
Yeah, and Patrick, I should also give you credit because now I'm streaming on the EduFlack Twitter feed as well. So it's just, ice cream on top of the cake. We're just living the dream right
Absolutely.
here. But I think it might be good for you to sort of take a step back and maybe share people a little bit about the mission of your organization and what they're involved with.
Sure. So the Woodrow Wilson Foundation has been around now for more than 7 decades, and its focus all along has been how do we prepare tomorrow's leaders for the challenges they're going to face. The last decade, that focus has been how do we prepare teachers and school leaders. And I think that becomes its own challenge. There are some tremendous education communications professionals across this country. I'm in awe of many of them. But education is one of those topics that since most of us were educated, most of us went to school, we all have opinions on that. And so the challenge always is, if you're looking at how do you transform the way we're going to prepare teachers for the classrooms of tomorrow, how do you do that in a way that's respectful of the teachers of today? How do you do that in a way that inspires those who might not otherwise choose teaching to go into teaching? It's one of those tremendous challenges that organizations like ours were created to serve.
Yeah, and when you talk about change, there's always a built-in resistance to change. And it's so important to be flexible, as you mentioned, and just how do you navigate that path? And especially, Meredith, you have a position where you've got the New York group, but you're also working with natural. There are multiple constituencies down on so many different levels, from the girls themselves, the people who are in charge of the different groups, the national organization, et cetera.
Right. We've been very strategic in defining those voices. So really being very specific as to with our plans. Are we having girl voice and also engaging girls? Again, they're our best spokespeople, right? So giving them the outlet and the validation that they are young spokeswomen and can go out and do that on their own and do that through our network. And then also, we have a voice we have 8,000 volunteers who deliver our program. So that's a completely different voice. Those are young women, moms, dads, community members who volunteer and serve them. So their needs are different, and also the way they receive all of this is very different. And then, of course, we have a donor voice. We're a nonprofit.
Right.
So how are we engaging donors? And it goes back to content. Content. You have amazing stories to tell. So relying on that content and using it as a resource to gather content from all of our constituents too.
Hey, Patrick?
Well, I think what she mentioned is just so essential. I mean, we're an operating foundation. People think with the name foundation, you're sitting on buckets of money. We're not. We have to raise every dollar that we spend. And I think what you see is people have a misplaced belief in what it means to be a nonprofit organization and what it means, what not-for-profit means, and what it means for the organization and how they communicate. And I think any successful organization, the Girl Scouts being one of them, recognizes you can't simply inform. It's not about one-way communication where you push it out. Everything we do is judged based on our clients, it's based on our customers, it's based on donors, it's based on alumni, all of the different audiences that we have to deal with. Everything has to go through those filters. You have to make sure it's not just about informing them, but ultimately, I think for both of our organizations, it's about driving people to take action.
It's engaging, yeah, it's about engagement.
So what are some maybe pitfalls to avoid, if you want to share some advice to the folks who are tuned in and watching?
I would say getting comfortable. Avoid getting comfortable, keeping yourself, trying as being ahead of it, and taking some risks to see what that engagement. You constantly have to be testing the waters and pushing that a little bit, but because once you commit, you have to be relentless. I think that's the biggest fear is when people go, if we're going to commit to this kind of level of PR, now communication is expected instantly and ad nauseum. So you have to be relentless. So once you commit, you're in.
And Patrick, you've jumped out early, especially in the online space. How does digital and online and social help, and how does it complicate things?
Well, I think it's funny. I had a conversation earlier this week with a for-profit company that was asking in the education space about digital and social media. And her big question was, we've been doing Twitter now for a couple of months. It hasn't directly resulted in sales yet, so we must not be needing to do it moving forward. It's understanding, I mean, this is both, you have a sprint, but this is a marathon. You're trying to get things done. You're trying to figure out how to move it forward. And I think, these all become real challenges. I think, when we look at this and you see one of the reasons why you see those organizations that have taken on digital, have taken on social media and done it in a meaningful way, is because they've recognized communications isn't a commodity. It's not something you simply add on at the end of an engagement saying, okay, we've done all this wonderful programmatic work, now go ahead and just tell people about it. The successful organizations, particularly in the not-for-profit space, whether you are the largest university in the country or the smallest city-based nonprofit, they recognize that communications is part of the effort from day one. It's part of the strategy, the planning, the program.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because there's the talk, it used to be, when I was earlier in my career, can PR get closer to the C-suite and have more influence? And now if all of it is engaging together, that works, it makes everything more powerful. And we do have a question that's come in. It asks, how can nonprofit spokespeople be as effective without as many financial resources? I think one of the great tips you gave is it's got to be integrated into the whole program from the very beginning. It's not let's do this and, oh wait, we've got this, ta-da, let's throw a bucket of money at it to get it out there.
And I think one of the best internal resources for that is, if you don't have a budget line specifically for it right now, you do have a staff, whether you have 5 people, whether you have 50 people, who are all most likely connected some way on their own personal social media. And in order to do some staff development on what does it mean for you as an employee, what are your expectations to be part of that social media movement, and how can you continue and tell your story and be part of the voice and face of the organization.
And I think it's multi-purposing that material. I think you look at it, we are a relatively small organization. We don't have buckets of money. We don't, other than salary and benefits, we don't have a communications budget to really speak of. Right. And what that means is it means when you do something, you have to use it in a multitude of ways. I mean, we already know from the science that for an idea to take hold, someone needs to hear it 6 or 8 times in different ways. The same goes for your material. So you create, we heard earlier today, you create that 1-minute video. Well, how do you cut that up? So you're using it on Instagram, you're using it on YouTube, you're figuring out how to post it on Twitter, you have it on your website, you're able to link to it from your blog. How do you cut, slice, and dice and do things in a way so that you're using the same material in a number of ways so that people are beginning to see the value, that it's not a one-time shot?
Right. No, that's so critical. And so far been some great value and tips. Any final thoughts that you have for the audience? If you could go back even in your own career and say, ooh, I wish I started doing this earlier, what might it be?
I think for me,
I know you guys are perfect. So you're
we are, absolutely. I learned everything from her. I think for me, it really was two things. Is one, I seem to live my life now on Twitter and other social media. When Twitter first came along, I was a blogger, and I thought Twitter was the silliest idea in the world. The thought that I was going to be able to take a 600-word thought in a blog post and put it into 140 characters that were meaningful. I resisted until I had individuals saying, "Oh, can you help us with Twitter?" And so I got to actually figure out how to do this myself. And so I think that forced it. But I think for me, it was one of those, I was fortunate in that I decided early on, or it was decided for me, that I would be a jack of all trades. I didn't specialize in one part of the communications operation. As needs came up, I took them on. And so I think that's been both a blessing and a curse. But I think, that because the communications field changes so much, I mean, you can't tell other than from the beard. I'm old enough to remember. I started working on Capitol Hill before we were emailing press releases. I was literally typing them out and faxing them. Some places I'd have to read it over the phone.
I just want to go on record as saying I think your jacket balances out any beard effect that there might be. So you've totally got street cred with the younger crowd.
At the end of the day, I mean, you look at this. I mean, I've seen organizations have to all of a sudden build websites when there were never websites. You've had to get on blogs. You've had to move into social media. We're now moving, live video, all of these other pieces that you can't predict. And so it goes, how do you build those other skills? How do you build the strategic skills, the writing skills, the thinking skills, so that you can adapt professionally?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, especially for the younger people who may be tuning in to this broadcast. To grow their careers, you almost need to be both a generalist and a specifically focused person. So you're creating expertise in multiple specific channels, which is really important. We've got two of our winners, and Meredith, jump in.
I'm going to just be very, very simple. In the fact, we have one of our Girl Scout laws is to be responsible for what I say and do. And that is when I'm talking with young women, when I'm talking with my own daughters, specifically in this, being your own spokesperson. Everything that you say can be on record.
Right.
And you have to be responsible for everything that you say and do. And sometimes it's that simple.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're all our own spokespeople now with social media on that. So the young ones definitely have the authenticity part, but there might not be areas where that kind of youthful authenticity is helpful.
And as
so
an organization, we really have a responsibility now where we have to move at their speed. So if that's the world that they're living in, we have to give them the tools to be that responsible spokesperson for themselves and to make sure that they're not hurting their image and their brand of who they are as an individual as they move on their leadership journey.
Yeah, and to those points, some of the poll results that we got earlier, half the audience was involved with having their own influencers, trying to be connected to other influencers, as well as opposed to just only a quarter were relying on those third-party experts to drive the message. So that is positive and also sort of holds dear the information, what the SPOKEies are all about. So for you guys, have you felt the SPOKEies have been sort of a valuable piece for your own recognition of the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. I think that we all get in our bubbles, and I know in nonprofits specifically, we get in our bubbles and we work in our track, and it's hard for us to measure outside of our organizations what our reach or our success, or is our conversation stretching and reaching. And for me, it was very validating to know that the work and the efforts and the money and the resources that we put into this have been validated and recognized, and show us that we can get that return and we can continue to tell our story that we need to tell. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and it's a really important piece that the people are bringing trust and authenticity to the table, and I think it's wonderful, and I'll get to you in a moment, Patrick, that this is happening in the nonprofit sector, but there's also a lot of truthful, authentic work going on in the corporate space, which is often overlooked as well, if people sort of get into this good guy, bad guy kind of paradigm that really just isn't a fit anymore, because there are good and bad actors in every space within it. So let's start recognizing the good ones, including Patrick. Tell us about your SPOKEies.
Well, I would just say, I think this is incredibly important, particularly in the nonprofit sector, but in corporate as well. I think it's one of those things that the SPOKEies recognizes the very best that goes into being an effective communicator and being an effective spokesperson. And I think for those who are not living this day in, day out, my colleague here was actually editing an op-ed on an iPhone as we were getting ready. But if you're not part of that world, what you see is you think that what we do for a living is the job that you see on TV, the publicist that you see who's going to the hot parties and getting things on page 6 here in New York. That's not what most of us do. And I think awards like this, the SPOKEies, helps people understand the impact that we're having, the contributions we make to the organization beyond a clip in a way that is meaningful and important.
Right.
When Patrick is on page 6, he is wearing orange.
I love it. Yeah. I think that would put him on there. Well, if the Knicks were any good, he could be on the back page with that. But you guys have been awesome. We're getting ready to move it to the panel. I would have to say that this is probably one of the hottest parties going on around, except for perhaps the Frankenstein food and the catering that's in the kitchen. But nothing is perfect. So we're going to get ready for our last panel coming up. You definitely won't want to miss that. It's a really good one. Thanks to you, our audience watching. Our crew here at DS Simon Media is doing an awesome job. It's a great program, and I'll throw it back to Carolina.
Thanks, Doug. Well, we bring on our new SPOKEies winners. You'll get to hear from Andrew Cipriano, the Vice President, Executive Producer, and host at Newswatch, about how spokespeople should present themselves in public.
Being a spokesperson for your own organization is easy, but it's hard. I mean, there's a couple of easy tips that you can take to be successful. One is just being well-groomed, being yourself, being confident, also being intelligent and informed. You really cannot understate the value of knowing what you're talking about, but also presenting it in a confident light. People want to believe and listen to people, and if you're able to exude that confidence and that intelligence and informed information, then people are going to listen. And that's really what it comes down to. But most important, just be yourself. Have fun with it. It's a fun job that we do being spokespeople. We talk to interesting people and we talk about interesting things. So if you believe in it and you have the passion, it's pretty much always going to shine through.
You'll also hear from Daniel Durasso, the winner of the corporate travel category, share his insights as the spokesperson and director of communications at Alliance Global Assistance.
Some of my top tips as a corporate spokesperson, I think, are well known, but I think it's good to be reminded of them from time to time. One that I really like is to make sure that the information you're sending out is newsworthy. And if you have a doubt about that, I think it's good to check with your public relations agency or others who are experts in media relations to make sure that you're being newsworthy and that you're writing the news hooks that are out there. Another tip that I have is make relationships with the reporters who cover your industry. We have great relationships with the trade media that covers us, and what we always do is make sure that we see face-to-face the reporters that cover us at least once a year, more often if possible. We also do a lot of surveys and research, and we make sure that the surveys and research are proprietary so that only we have this information and we're the source for it.
Our time has come to an end, so let's meet our last panelist. Doug, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Carolina. It's been a tremendous program so far, and we're wrapping up with 3 great SPOKEies Awards winners. And welcome to Spokesperson Secrets to Build Your Brand. I'm Doug Simon. First, Gabe Sagley is the senior editor at Travel Zoo. He's the SPOKEies Award winner in the media category, and randomly I worked with him last week as he covered the opening of the Legoland Castle Hotel that we were working on. Gabe, do you have a top tip to get us started?
Visit the Legoland Castle Hotel, because it's a great little place to be. If your kids like Legos, it was great to see you there last week. I think we've had some great tips out here this afternoon. I think of when I go into, being a spokesperson for Travel Zoo, being relatable, being relevant, knowing your audience, and knowing the medium that you're speaking through as well. I mean, if I'm speaking to a live television broadcast, it's going to be a bit of a different conversation than if I'm speaking to a print reporter. If I'm speaking to on a radio show, if I'm speaking to a vlogger, for example, these are totally different media that require a bit of a different spin on the message points that you are trying to deliver and the conversations you're trying to have. So understanding the medium that you're on at that moment, I think makes a big difference.
That's a great tip, and we'll do a deeper dive into that. We also have Mike McCormick, who's Executive Director and COO of the Global Business Travel Association. He's the SPOKEies Award winner in the Nonprofit Trade Association category. As disclosure, we have worked with Mike in the past, and he's been right from this studio at DS Simon Media. So Mike, what's your top tip?
I'd say the biggest thing for us is commitment. You know, you commit very early to a core message, and everything you do, both in terms of how you communicate within your membership, outward to the media, really ties back to that core message. We made a conscious effort literally 5 years ago to start a process of back to this core message that business travel drives business growth, connecting back to the jobs and economy, and really looking at it on a global basis. But that core message we've carried through in literally every single thing we've done for the last 5 years as a result.
That's awesome. And finally, very excited that we've got Mark Goldman. He's joining us via Skype, and he's the marketing sponsorship manager of the Marine Corps Marathon and SPOKEies Award winner in the corporate sports category. Among the obstacles he dealt with, getting nearly 20,000 marathoners to the starting line with the entire D.C. Metro shut down. So Mark, can you share a top tip with us?
Well, first of all, greetings from the nation's capital, and hoorah on representation of the United States Marine Corps. So glad to be here. With regard to how I approach our messaging and communications efforts, it's always starting with the audience in mind and considering how they're going to receive the message. It's far more important the message they receive than the message that I am offering to them. So I've got to make sure that in everything I do and the way I prepare the messages, it will be received by the various audiences the way we want them to. So I listen to them before I start to speak.
Great. Now, on our last panel, Patrick spoke about the need to be flexible and how important that was. When you learned that the D.C. Metro was going to be shut down when you had to move 20,000 runners to the starting line, I'm guessing you might have had to alter some of the plans.
It was a complete upheaval of an operational plan that had been in place for decades. And so when you have many runners that participate year after year and have a routine, I mean, when you're a marathon runner, you are practicing habit so that you can execute your plan on event day. And we were going to upend this. Now, there are also many thousands of people who were coming to town who had never been a part of the process. And now everything that we had been talking about before Metro changed our plans, we had to undo all the education we had done. So this was a many-tiered process to help get all these people on the page at the same time and convey a clear message with so many different elements to it.
Great. And what's great about this group is even with so much great content across the whole panel, there's still an area we haven't really taken that deeper dive in, and that's how do you work as a spokesperson to different types of outlets and different organizations? Gabe, you started speaking with that. Can you share sort of not just maybe the message, but methodology and sort of the preparedness that goes into depending who you're speaking with?
Well, I think being very prepared is actually key. So a lot of what I do, and I deal with more sort of leisure travel and inspiring people to travel, sort of aspirational travel, where Mike deals with a lot more of the business side of the industry. And there's definitely a cohesiveness there, but slightly different audiences and approaches. A lot of what I do is on live television. My background is in broadcast journalism. That helps. I was an anchor on a TV station in Santa Barbara, California, so I know that anchors like to sound oftentimes like they know what they're talking about. So I go into these interviews pretty prepared for pretty much anything. You go in with a certain amount of talking points, message points, but at the end of the day, you have to be flexible enough in a medium like that to really sort of go with the flow, be able to respond to the questions and in the conversation sort of directions that the folks leading these conversations are taking. And I think the more prepared you are, the more aware of what's going on in the world around that's affecting travel, affecting people's desire to travel, the more prepared you are to jump on conversations no matter what turn they happen to take.
Cool. And Mike?
Well, so for us, it's a little different. You talked about flexibility. All the work we had done and leading up to last year, when the travel ban was announced, when the electronics ban was announced, that was our version of flexible. We had to really change our message. We had to go back to everything that we were looking at, everything that we had done, talk to our members, and really separate out the ideology from the reality of what was happening to our industry, and really be on point with the message we were delivering. So it was still on message, but it was in a totally different context, a totally different political environment. It really changed how we had the tone we had to take, but again, bringing it back to our core message again in a way that our members could relate to, understand, and support.
Right, and there's so many organizations that are challenged because they're the lovers and haters, if you will, for anything.
Right.
Just the intensity of feeling is great. Now, Mark, for you, one of the advantages is that you're with a group and affiliation that's pretty universally loved today. So what's your take? Because you have different constituencies you're both working with and also that you're talking to. How do you manage that a bit differently?
Well, one is, like you said, we do have different constituencies, and what's interesting is while we represent the United States Marine Corps, we are also a endurance event, and so we have to balance our messaging as an event with that of the messaging and the intent of how Marine Corps communicates. So there's a lot of shared effort and collaboration there to make sure that while we are conveying the messages in an appropriate tone and an appropriate voice for the event that we are still true to the culture and the messaging of the United States Marine Corps. And through the various channels that we will communicate, we're never losing sight that those that are really tuned into our message are the runners and the participants, or those that have an affinity for the Marine Corps. So across the various channels, however we're communicating, we always have that individual in mind so that our messages are finely tuned for them to receive exactly what we want to share.
Great, and we've got a social question that was submitted, and we were asked, following up on your discussion of preparedness, this person would like to know more, and I hope everyone watching wants to know more, about how you engage your organization in your overall messaging strategy.
Yeah, so for us, I mean, it really starts on every level. I mean, we have 10,000 members globally, but 1,000 of those really commit on a volunteer basis at any given time. So we're really active. We have a great activist, board of directors. We have a lot of, committees. So really, it's taking that messaging and going back to all of them, really, constantly pulsing them on what we do. Everything from just short surveys to, more extended interactions and studies. But all of that has to tie back to your message, and you can never do it enough, right? It's because you need that basis of support for your message to be genuine and to be heard.
Yeah, for us, we are probably our biggest challenge internally is the fact that we are a global company. We're in North America, we're in Europe, we're in Asia Pacific, and to create that common thread comes down really to having that core message and that core desire to inspire travelers, no matter what corner of the globe they happen to be in, and then internally to make those channels really not only open them up, but have them be streamlined and very effective is probably one of the biggest things that we are embracing at the moment. So, we have a very travel savvy, very diverse employee base globally with different perspectives and different backgrounds, and really it comes down to day-to-day almost communication, whether it's via conference calls, WebEx calls, surveys. We're doing much more of those internally as well. And it's amazing the kind of information and insight and even direction that you glean from being able to tap really from top to bottom your entire workforce.
Yeah, and Mark, how about your engagement within your organization and your key opinion leaders, if you will, and influencers that you're trying to reach?
One of the important things about conveying information about the marathon is that there's so many different stages to the participants' experience, or what we call the runner journey, from when they're considering participation in the event, through registration, through their training, to their participation. And there's many different elements to that and information that they need to know. So for us on the communication side, we are in constant contact and planning with the different divisions that are preparing for Marine Corps Marathon. And so we are always building our messaging and scaffolding to our key point by backing up a couple steps and giving the basis for the information that we're going to share to the various audiences that we might be speaking to, but letting them know the process that we arrived at, why this information is going to be new or different, and what they need to know. So it's not just we didn't just arrive at that particular example you used earlier. We didn't just say, hey, Metro is undergoing this construction and everything is different. We backed up and gave our thought process and got the audience in step with us, so that when we finally delivered, hey, these are the changes, they knew not only the process we went through why we arrived at these decisions and how it's the best possible outcome. And so we try and apply that against everything, even if it's not as significant as that Metro announcement a couple years ago.
Great. And another question that we're getting through social media and the Compro feed is, how fulfilling is it to be a spokesperson and being able to represent your organization and then be rewarded for it as a SPOKEies Award winner? Anyone want to jump in, Mike?
I'll take that. I mean, look, I have the benefit. I've worked in the travel industry my entire career. I love the industry. I hope I project that. I mean, I'm really proud to represent my organization. And so for me, it is one of the most satisfying parts of my job. I feel it really is truly a great benefit in my career to be able to do this. So again, but it's a lot of work to do it too. A lot of work.
Right. Now, how much of your job is spent as spokesperson versus your day job? Because I know that can be different. Gabe, obviously for you, it's probably a higher percentage in the spokesperson role. So how does that break down for you? And Mark, we'll also let you weigh in on that.
Well, we play a lot of roles in the association world. You do as an executive director, you have a lot of hats. You're working on the business side. You're working internally, of course, member relationships. Your board of directors, actively working with them as well. So this is a part of it. And we're also very active on the Hill. We're active in Brussels on political issues and lobbying. So you really have to fit it into a broad array of things that you're responsible for, and always make sure you're giving it and consciously giving it the right amount of attention to do it well.
And that was something the Atlantic Health Systems folks were talking about, because it's very easy when things get busy to let that piece of the pie slide, and suddenly you're behind and catching up. And Patrick and Meredith were also speaking to the point about how the communication piece has to be integrated from day one on the project, especially if you're limited in resources, and in effect, who isn't these days, because you're trying to maximize ROI from every dollar spent.
Well, and that's a great point too. I mean, we have a great communications effort, and it goes hand in hand. And you have to be, that constant pulse has to be there, even when the issue isn't, first and foremost in the media. Especially when you're working with national, global media, it's a constant pulse. You have to be doing it every day consistently to be effective.
Great. And Gabe?
I echo Mike. I mean, first of all, I do love this industry, and I think that if you love the industry you're in, and you love the company you're working for. I've been with Travelzoo for 12 and a half years. That shows. It's a little tough to be an effective, aspirational spokesperson if you are just so about the folks you work with and the company you work for. So embrace the company. I'm a member of Travelzoo. I book travel through our website. I'm very familiar with the content, and that's what inspires me to speak about it and to share it with the world.
Yeah, in our influencers media study that we conduct every year at DS Simon Media, journalists by 84% to 16% said they preferred to book an interview with an in-house spokesperson. And one of the biggest fears of in-house corporate communicators and concerns was the level of preparedness and really the depth of knowledge when they go to a third-party expert. Sure, if it stays on script, they might be okay, but if someone asks them a different question, they clearly just don't have the background and understanding, and everyone's sort of holding their breath, like, oh my God, please don't say something that's going to become a problem. And Mark, for you, obviously in your role, it seems like it would be extremely fulfilling, what you're working on, what you're representing. And can you share that, and also in context of the SPOKEies Awards and gaining the recognition for that? From my understanding, I would believe that within the military environment, recognition is pretty important.
Exactly right. And so I have been just backing up in an agency where I served in a communications role for several clients, and I can speak to the great benefits of being in-house, as we just touched on, and being there every day and understanding the ebbs and flows and the backgrounds behind decisions, and being able to craft the messaging from the ground up, because you're a part of all the internal workings. For me, with the marathon, to be a part of something that is just so wholly positive for all the people that are a part of it, whether they're running in memory or in honor of a loved one, or for a charitable cause, or because they're reforming their own health, or just trying to best the distance of 26.2 miles. It is a very positive experience. And then to do it alongside the United States Marine Corps means a lot to people. And so what I see the role as a spokesperson is the storyteller and bringing everybody onto the same page. I am, out there crafting the messages across various mediums for the many months leading up to the event, but then also speaking at the event start line and trying to make sure everyone has a similar shared view of the day and of the experience that they're about to partake in. And that's one of the key parts of what I think is so valuable of being the spokesperson is that you can help craft that shared understanding and that community awareness of what it is that you're speaking about. And so I find that to be incredibly important for the long-lasting and enduring vision that people have of our event when other people turn around and speak on our behalf and other people become ambassadors for the experience. I hope that they will take from it the messaging and the understanding that we've conveyed to them.
That's awesome. Mike, you would have thought?
Well, just that the award itself is really a reflection of your organization, and it comes back to you as a spokesperson. You're just that, right? You're on point, but it's really about everything behind that. Everybody in your organization, your membership, your leadership. Everybody needs to be in sync to really effectively deliver the messages. And to the point you're making too, it's always great when you see others take your message and repeat it back to you. The best moment we had after years of hard work was when we had a reporter from the New York Times come back and repeat our messaging back to us as if they were, articulating to us about the business travel drives business growth. And we said, we've arrived. Yeah. Now we know we've crossed that point. And a lot of it, again, is just all of that. It's everything behind the scenes, all that work, all that time to really put that forward. And it's, it's an organization's commitment, not just an individual.
Great, and I believe we had one more social media question that's pointed, and after that we'll get your final thoughts and wrap up the show. So questions being asked, I guess it's sort of for me, what inspired the SPOKEies and how can we win in 2018? What the SPOKEies really came about was some anecdotal data we came across when we were doing our media influencers survey, that there was this tremendously increased demand for in-house spokespeople compared to using third-party experts. And we were starting to think, so what can we do to shine the light on that? It was being rated much higher for authenticity, much more willing to book them for interviews, rated as way less likely to make a big blunder that could get them. It was sort of every checkbox that you had was leaning in that direction. Right. Yet, as we saw from campaigns out there, it wasn't even weighted, 25% in favor of in-house. Sometimes it would go the other way. So that combined with the political environment, when somehow suddenly spokespeople were really out there, we kept it away from politics, importantly, really made us think, hey, we really need to find a way to credit and recognize the people in-house who are doing a great job and really making things happen for their organization, being truthful, being authentic, bringing that kind of value to hopefully raise the idea, and if by doing so it happened to help our business grow a little bit, that was going to be okay too. But to what Danielle was saying earlier, it's sort of like mission driven, and let it go that way and let's see what happens. And I have to give great credit to my team here at DS Simon Media, also to Faith Shapiro at Compro, who really jumped in early on and thought this is a cool idea and partnered with us to help bring that awareness to the public and help work with us on making sure the interface worked, help get the judging involved. And we had an awesome panel of judges. So that's really well. So let's get a final thought from each of you. Leave the audience with some brilliant thing that they can put in place right
pressure's
away.
On now.
Yeah, pressure's on. So who wants any volunteers for that?
Well, I'll say thanks so much for the SPOKEie. It was obviously a great honor and a surprise. It made me actually sort of look at what I do day in and day out. I sort of took for granted that I was inside this organization and that I was given this platform. But as Mike said so eloquently, really, you're sort of what bubbles to the top in some cases, and you're out there delivering a message that's really a cohesive network of ideas and perspectives that is your coworkers and the people that you work in day in and day out with. So that's, it made me really sort of reassess and sort of appreciate all over again the position that I'm in. I'd say that when it comes to being a great spokesperson, just believe in the message that you are delivering, live it, breathe it, embrace it, and be relatable. Understand that you're talking to people who are actually paying attention and want to better their lives by listening to the information you're delivering. And so keeping them foremost in your mind and in your message is going to make it that much more effective.
And if you don't believe in the message, fight it internally. Don't
Absolutely.
just go out there with
Right.
something that everyone's going to see through, because I was mentioning earlier, it takes so much hard work to maintain trust and build credibility, and it goes away like that. It's done. Mike?
I'd say don't be afraid to make mistakes, in the sense of, like, when you're out there, be yourself, right? Bring yourself to it. People are looking for genuine voices. That's what's going to rise above in this environment. It is about the message, but it's also about just being you. And people see that. They're not looking for perfection, on camera, in your voice. They're looking for, the consistency and that authenticity. And if you have that, I mean, people relate to it, and they accept it, and you will get your message through. But it's, in these times, right, there's so much messaging, and just, it's an avalanche, right, that comes at everyone every day. So to rise above, you need to really pay attention to all those details.
Yeah, and that also gives you a great foundation to
It
carry
does.
you through when you mess up. And sometimes
Exactly.
bad
And
stuff
that's okay.
happens. But if you've built that trust,
okay.
then people know that you're trying, you're making an effort, and you're working on it. And that can really be a difference maker.
Correct.
And Mark, let's wrap up with you, and also credit and praise for all the great work that you do. It's so important.
Thank you. The SPOKEies as an award, begin the recognition of this as a skill and a craft, and I appreciate that. Everyone is out there talking all day, every day, but to be able to be authentic and to be genuine and to be sincere comes from having a depth of knowledge and a passion and an understanding, not only of the information you want, but the end goal. And then being able to convey that in a way that is trustworthy and believable. And that comes from your commitment, your understanding of what it is that you represent and what your mission is. And so, I appreciate this award so much, and I appreciate what it stands for. And that's the recognition of a skill that often isn't recognized unless perhaps someone misses the mark or is so shining like this. So thank you for bringing light to this category of the communications field.
Great, and I appreciate that, and I'm going to be throwing it back to Carolina to wrap things up in a moment. I'll tell you, it seems like she's been in 2 places at once today. It's amazing. But before I do, I want to thank you, the audience, for tuning in. Of course, our great panel of guests. They're amazing. Thanks for watching through our social media live platform on more than 20 different social channels. I want to thank Faye Shapiro at Compro On Stream Media, who handled the streaming, the fantastic team here at DS Simon Media in our production studio right in Midtown Manhattan near Madison Square Garden. We had a great team that put the event together, including Carolina Osma, Michael Farr, Michael O'Donnell, who was handling the streaming services, Tamika Henry, Mike Bako, Nick Hust, as well as Chad, Constantine, Brian, and Jason. And take it away, Carolina, and thanks for watching.
So there you have it. Inspiring advice from spokespeople across a variety of industries, sharing their secrets to successful in-house representation of their brands. We want to thank our partner, Compro.biz, for the live webcast. Additionally, thank you, our audience, for tuning in via the live webcast or the different social media channels we're live streaming on. We are so proud of our inaugural SPOKEies winners and honorees. Remember, this could be you next year. So, we'll see you then.